Joe Rogan is easily one of the most popular podcasters of all time, and partially so due to his authentic and genuine personality. But that doesn't necessarily mean that Joe Rogan's friends in the comedy scene share all of his same values. And some of these friends hold extremely dark skeletons, with a ton involving sexual misconduct with minors. Today we are going to be discussing Joe Rogan's once great friends, and possibly still friends, Brendan Schaub, Bryan Callen, and Chris D'Elia. Brendan Schaub has become one of the most hated comedians right now. I mean, this guy has an entire subreddit that is dedicated to just hating on him. And he recently crashed his TRX, which is a shame. It's a shame and embarrassing.
Starting emergency call to the SOS service provided by the manufacturer. To cancel, press the SOS or cancel button. Starting SOS call.
For those of you who don't know, Brendan Schaub was an ex-UFC fighter who took the chance at being a fighter when his college career at being a fullback did not work out. Nevertheless, Schaub's career was cut short just because, well, he wasn't that great, or at least he wasn't as good as he thought he was. Sure, Brendan Schaub had some great victories over some top-notch opponents, but good would just be the word to describe Brendan's fighting ability, because he definitely was not very technical in any of the MMA backgrounds. Brendan would peak at the ranks at number 10 after his fight with Travis Brown, where he got absolutely devastated. Eventually, after only winning 2 of his last 6, Joe Rogan, who has been a longtime UFC commentator and MMA guru, would point out to Brendan that maybe he just was not as good as he thought he was and would maybe need to take a back seat and try a different route as a career, basically telling him to retire before he faced serious medical repercussions.
There's a fluidity to their movement that you don't really have, and it's not that you don't try hard, it's not that you're not dedicated, it's not that you're not disciplined, it's not that you're not intelligent. There's shit that other people can do that you can't do.
Of course, Brendan took it rough, but eventually he saw what Joe meant. At this point, Brendan had already created the infamous and popular podcast, The Fighter and the Kid, with comedian co-host Bryan Callen, who we'll get to in just a little bit. And he was having great success, as the show would eventually be picked up by Fox. Sadly, the two would have to cut ties with Fox Sports due to the fact that the company wanted to have a bit more control on who was on camera. Not Bryan. And also the profanity they used. They obviously didn't want them, cussing under the, Fox Sports banner. So they started producing it themselves. And it actually went pretty well. Now, Brendan Schaub claims comedy has always been a very big dream of his, and he's always idolized big name comedians. Now, obviously, who am I to tell him that that's not true? But I don't really think it's true. I think that more so by association and relationship that he likes the idea of being a comedian and likes the lifestyle that Joe and Bryan probably live. But this ideology would be backed even stronger by 2 accomplished and professional comedians like Joe and Bryan telling him that he was actually funny and that he should give it a shot. And it's also very easy to just think your friend is funny in general. So, I don't know, just keep that in the back of your head as well. And boom, it's off. Brendan Schaub launches his infamous comedy career. At first, he just started doing small acts opening for his buddy Bryan Callen, slowly trying to accumulate some traction in the comedy world. Or quote unquote, possibly, leeching some fan base, but, who am I to say that? Yet Brendan Schaub would make the extreme mistake of dropping his comedy specials way too early in his career when he was way too inexperienced, and they were horrible. Sadly, after dropping his specials of Gringo Papi and You'd Be Surprised, the world would begin to realize that maybe Brendan Schaub was not so talented after all. The 2 specials flopped so horribly that Brendan Schaub would actually attempt to boost his ratings by giving away free CBD oil. Come on. Moving forward, Brendan Schaub would eventually form the ever-so-dynamic podcast with Southern Louisiana charmer and rising star Theo the Rat King Von, which was The King and the Sting. These 2 had a relationship that made you feel like you were just hanging out with your best friends. Now, a huge bombshell would then explode as Brendan Schaub would get exposed for hitting on comedian Kalila Kuhn while she was with other comedian Bobby Lee. Kalila would mention on her Trash Tuesday podcast that a very unfunny comedian made sexual advances towards her. Now, this is where things would start to get very, very ugly for Brendan. Now, one of the co-stars of Kalila Kuhn's podcast, named Annie Letterman, would actually come out to talk about a time when the same unfunny comedian allegedly wanted her to blow him in his truck, which would soon instigate, the whole drug walk.
Can't talk, But I'm walking to my truck. Can I get a truck walk? Yeah.
I had a guy that was like, why don't you walk me to my truck? This married guy where I'm like, and we know him. I'm not going to say who it is, but he's like,
know him.
why don't you give me a walk? Why don't you you should walk me to my truck. I'm like, so what, I can blow you? Like,
Of course, the fans would begin to piece all of this together, and Brendan Schaub would begin to get a lot of hate. Following this, Brendan Schaub would contact Bobby Lee, and I quote, saying that he does not want to have to get nasty with Kalila, but he will if he has to. Supposedly, Bobby and Brendan would come to an agreement that both parties would naturally be letting it go. Then, immediately after, on another Trash Tuesday podcast, the girls and the rest of the cast insinuate that they are being sued by another big-name podcast, but they did not mention any names.
Dumois is a celebrity gossip account, and maybe about a month ago, they posted something about our show. This post on the gossip site said this popular podcast, which we were like, hey girl, thanks for calling us popular. And it said that we had a lot of controversy behind the scenes and tension, that we were a part of a big scandal, and that the tension you were feeling was real amongst
nobody
us.
felt any tension.
But that scandal that they were referring to had nothing to do with the three of us, and it was because
Go ahead.
It's potentially we were being threatened, a lawsuit, and I'm scared to even say that out loud.
We can't really. We just won't say the name, right? But
We won't. Yeah.
But someone was behind the scenes threatening to sue us.
Even the thing that started it all was really just an anonymous anecdote.
And I'll say this
kind of
to that
blew
person,
up, yeah.
to that person who threatened us, I'll say this. You think you have a one over me? I fucking dare you, motherfucker. I dare you. Let it out of your chest, because that is actually not a real threat. You think you're threatening me, but it's kind of, that information's already out there, you little bitch.
Of course, the fans who have no life and have nothing else to do, like me, put two and two together and immediately know that they're referring to Brendan. Brendan, not seeing the clips and thinking that they said his name, would get on the phone with Bryan and call Bobby Lee to threaten that they have alleged information that could end his career for good, and that they knew that he was supposedly behind all of the Reddit hate that Brendan Schaub and his family had been getting for so many years. Brendan Schaub came to the conclusion after hiring private investigators who would dig through many of the hate comments on the Reddit feed and trace the IP address back, and one would eventually lead back to Kalila and Bobby's home. Yet, after finally realizing that Kalila never said his name, Brendan would eventually reach out for a sit-down to clear the air and hopefully, do some damage control and clear his name. And of course, in the midst of all of this, Theo Von would choose to split from the King and the Sting podcast and focus primarily on his individual podcast this past weekend, which I'm sure was just a business decision by Theo to kind of, separate himself from all the drama that Bryan Callen, Chris D'Elia, and Brendan Schaub bring. Brendan Schaub would then rebrand the podcast as The Golden Hour with other comedian Chris D'Elia. And this podcast in particular has very little success in comparison to The King and the Sting, which kind of just shows you that the fans were just there for Theo. Joe Rogan has recently opened up his new comedy club in Austin, Texas, and it has certainly been a new hotbed for new hot comics. But he has not and will not allow Brendan Schaub to perform there, which I find hilarious. And most recently, Brendan Schaub has officially quit comedy. Who knows if Brendan Schaub will be or ever was good enough at comedy to grace the stage as a comedian, or if he was just up there because of the people that he knows. But what I do know is that after all this drama, and ever since Theo Von has left, Brendan Schaub's podcast life has definitely not been so hot. Now, moving on to the next member of this comedy creep crew is Chris D'Elia. There's a little tongue twister there for you. Now, Chris D'Elia has probably faced the most goddamn allegations out of the Creep Squad, just by the sheer number of women who have came out and accused Chris of being a quote-unquote control freak, groomer, and child predator. Again, alleged. I don't want any lawsuits. Born on March 29th, 1980 in Montclair, New Jersey, D'Elia would quickly gain an attraction to comedy while attending a private school in Los Angeles. Chris would dive headfirst into the comedy scene in 2006 and would swiftly gain lots of fans and followers in the local circuit, with the releases of comedy specials White Male, Black Comic in 2013 and Man on Fire in 2017, which would both go on to become critically acclaimed. Now, D'Elia would also make lots of appearances on TV. His catalog of acting roles is actually pretty deep, with lighter roles in movies and shows like Alone Together and Life in a Year, to way more serious and kind of ironic role of a serial rapist in the hit show You. Now, combining this with a popular podcast that let fans dive into what Chris was really like, or at least what he kind of portrayed on camera, would just make things explode for Chris D'Elia. Crystalia's long list of allegations generally insist on him using his social status and notoriety to be intimate with minors while knowing and having a cult of women that he treats like sexual slaves, who are most certainly mentally and emotionally punished if not cooperating correctly, all while trying to maintain the guise of being a nice, married family man. Chris would also require each of these girls to maintain sharing their location with him, just to show how controlling he really was. Things would get so messy for Crystalia that at one point 2 of the young girls who he associated with were actually hanging out together until they realized they were both texting Crystalia at the same time. Now, one of these girls would actually do a private interview with YouTuber Kyle Anderson. This young woman was smart enough to record her phone calls with Crystalia following these accusations, and in these phone calls you can clearly see how Chris has no remorse and is just trying to cover his tracks and play damage control.
I don't know. I don't get how you can say that you cared about me or any of the other people. That I just don't get it, and I just want to understand.
I don't know. I mean, I thought that, can you show me where you are? I mean, I don't ever want people feeling bad about themselves. Like, you know that, don't you?
I don't feel like I do, because, again, there's so many things that, like, you're saying now, like, oh, I didn't know that was the case, but, like you say you didn't know about the weight thing, but, like, you did. We talked about it, and then...
I did, but did I always said you looked good, right?
Kind of, but I remember asking you, like saying about wanting to, like, be a little thicker or whatever, like, put on weight, and you literally told me that you have thick girls, that you want me dainty, like, and it fucked with me a lot.
I see. I mean, if you don't believe in that stuff, it would definitely have me with people that send me death threats and shit.
I want you to understand that, like, I don't want to delete everything because it's so infuriating to have people tell you that something you experienced, something you went through didn't happen. And having that conversation with Kristen.
Not only that, but apparently Crystalia's wife was also knowledgeable to at least some extent. His old tour manager would also go on the record to give his side of the story and expose Crystalia. His friends in the comedy scene seemed to have his back for a while in the beginning, with many like Bobby Lee and Bryan Callen reaching out and vouching for him.
At least talk about this. You guys, if you follow the news, if you're alive, if you've been following this Twitter thing the way we have, you know what's going on with our friend Chris. I'm not, in these situations, people in Hollywood tell you what to say. And I said to Brendan, what we can do is tell the truth. And I'm not going to sit here. I'm a man, and I define myself on how I respond to these situations in real time when the pressure's really on. And so this is what I'll say. I always knew Chris as a ladies' man. I have never, and I'm going to say this, I have never seen or heard of him doing anything illegal, ever. This is as shocking to me as I'm watching this happen. I don't know what to think, and I don't know what to say. I don't. But I'm going to say it again. I have personally never heard or seen him do anything illegal. That's all I can say. And right now I have to believe that because he's still a friend. And it may be unpopular to say that, but I don't know what else to say. I don't know what else to do. And I'm not going to be some, I just think it's an impossible situation. And I'm just at a loss. I'm at a loss. And I'm praying that what I'm hearing isn't true. Maybe that's the best way to put it.
I can't talk.
It's just, it's like, it's a weird thing because I said to Brendan, I said, it's like, it's like watching someone die or something. And also, it's what's important to say, we haven't spoken to Chris.
No.
And we've never been on the road with him. I was on the road with him about 14 years ago once when he was just beginning, but I've never been on the road with him. So I don't know. I don't know. I don't know what to think, and I don't know. And that's what's so frustrating.
I'm just sad.
Yeah.
I'm sad.
So anyway. Yeah. Sometimes that's the best thing to say, is to say, I don't know what to say. And I'm just, I don't know, man. Yeah. It's a fucked up thing.
I can't talk. Fuck.
Well, that's appropriate. That's appropriate right now. You can just pray that that nothing's true.
Because no matter what the facts are, whatever comes out, I'm as shocked as anyone. I'm hurt. I'm mad. I'm fucking mad, man. I'm mad at him.
Okay.
But after these allegations just continued to build and build and build, his friends would soon realize that at some point there was some truth to the matter if all of these women are telling the same story. His friends would soon begin to distance themselves from him. Of course, except for Brendan Schaub and Bryan Callen. His podcast with Joe Rogan was even removed after Spotify decided to crack down on controversial guests. Of course, Chris D'Elia hasn't done any jail time, and at the end of the day, all of this is alleged. But who knows what's still in store and what details could still come out, or who could be potentially pressing charges. I also find it very ironic and fitting that Brendan Schaub and Chris D'Elia are still so close after all of these allegations have came out. And it truly makes me wonder if Brendan Schaub really believes that Chris is innocent, or just knows he needs a co-star and is willing to deal with the accusations. Moving on to our final member of the comedy creep crew, Bryan Callen would spend most of his life trying to become an aspiring actor before hitting big. Bryan Callen would get his start in the hit sketch comedy series Mad TV.
How much meat did you sell today, Sonny?
Hi, Mama. You sure look pretty today, Mama.
How much meat?
A bratwurst.
One bratwurst? That's not a lot of meat. That's not a lot of meat at all!
Mama!
And eventually on the HBO prison series, Oz. And also making cameos in movies like The Hangover. Just like acting, stand-up would come natural to Bryan Callen, and he would naturally jump in the comedy game. But Bryan Callen is also one, just like Chris D'Elia, who likes to bask in the ideology of being a dirtbag.
I'm too horny, I think, to be a good person. Like, I mean, just as a guy, you're always thinking, it's always this, if I didn't have this situation, I'd get so much done, but he's always like, let's go, you know? I want to fuck strangers. I'm like, whoa, I'm married. I could lose my house.
I'm openly acknowledging that he's always been the creepiest guy in the room on one hand, and on the other hand, acknowledging the fact that he's always been some kind of a womanizer, which I find odd because it's kind of Bryan Callen is kind of a little interesting looking motherfucker. Now, this would all truly come to fruition when a woman by the name of Catherine Targaman would come out to tell her own horror story with Bryan. Targaman had first met Callen in 1994 before he was an established actor on the first season of Mad TV, Oz, or Kingdom. Callen hadn't even made his infamous cameo in The Hangover yet, so this was Callen at his most natural form. You know, before the fame. Targaman's father, actor Bill Fiore, actually gave Bryan Callen one of his first acting gigs in a New York theatrical production. Years later, Targaman would eventually run into Callen at a bank, who was supposedly very happy to show her around town. They became good friends, going to dinner with other colleagues and eventually discussing the crazy life that was the one of being an actor/actress. She eventually booked a TV pilot, and Bryan suggested they celebrate over dinner. On arriving, Bryan Callen immediately commented on her outfit. I come downstairs in these dumb jeans and a gray long sleeve shirt, and he goes, "What are you wearing a bra for? Girls don't wear bras." Targaman would just laugh this off as she got in the car. Now, after getting sick over the meal and half a glass of wine at dinner, disoriented and nauseated, Callen would still suggest that they go and see the theater that night. In the car, Bryan would attempt to find a newsstand where he could potentially purchase a paper to find showtimes, but he would take a detour to stop at his home. Once in the home, the two sat down on the couch and Bryan Callen allegedly began kissing Targaman. Still feeling ill, she would make her way to the bathroom and told the article that she remembered telling herself that she needed to tell him to take her home and that this was not going the way she wanted to. And also that she was in love with another man. And that her and Callen were just great friends. And that she just didn't want to do it. As she emerged from the bathroom, Callen would immediately emerge behind her in the mirror, mentioning to her that she looked so good that she could be a Playboy playmate. Pretty creepy, like nice one, dude. Soon after, she found herself being pushed onto the bed and refusing Bryan Callen, saying no, but just deciding to remain silent up until it was over. Once over, she began to cry and search for her underwear that were on the floor, which had been chewed up by Bryan Callen's dog, which, I don't know, I thought that was weird when I read it. Noticing her tears, Callen would attempt to play damage control and try to not look so bad. And also probably calm her down a little bit by saying, "Oh, what am I? The big bad R word? Am I a big bad R word?" You know, and this is all allegedly, of course. This is just me telling the tale. It's allegedly. But then he says, "Come on, you're gonna be my girlfriend now. We just had to get this out of the way." I don't know, man. Not a good story, you know what I mean? Not a good story. Bryan would soon after, of course, deny all allegations and would come out to comment that the encounter was consensual. In the end, I don't mean to badmouth these celebrities in any way, shape, or form. What do you guys think? Let me know down in the comments what you guys think of the dark side of the comedy world, which involves Bryan Callen, Chris D'Elia, and Brendan Schaub. Thank you for watching. See you in the next video.